He is Ron Darling back here on the Rich Eisen Show. How are you, Ron?
I'm doing great, Rich. Thanks for having me.
Always, always. Were you as surprised as I was to see Kershaw start Game 2 after all the work he got in against the Nets?
I was kind of surprised. A lot of things in the National Series. When he sent them back out for the 7th, I mean, literally, the guy had to pitch himself into shape to be able to pitch in the postseason. Then he starts again, and then pitches in relief, and then starts against the Cubs. I think it's ironic that it's the relief outing by Kershaw that has really changed how a lot of people feel about him. I'm really happy for him. He's one of the greatest pitchers of his generation, of any generation, and I'm glad people are thinking about him the way everyone has always thought about him. He's a clutch guy.
Let's dive into that a little bit more. Why do you think his relief outing has changed people's viewpoints?
Because I think what happens in today's game, where we tend to believe we're babying most of our starters, I think when a person agrees to go out there, and I saw it in '88 with Oral Hershiser, who did it against the Mets in that '88 series, you just feel like, I don't know, as a fan, you're saying, boy, these guys make a lot of money, they're babied, they're not pitched past a certain point. And this is a guy who says, I don't care how I feel, I don't care how my arm strength is, I don't care about anything. The team is more important than the individual. And I think that's what people change their mind.
Does that permeate in the clubhouse too?
Oh, absolutely. The street cred you get when you do something like that. I mean, he had it in spades anyways because he's such a great player. But, when we think about Madison Bumgarner, we think about his starts. But, boy, do we really think about that 5-inning relief stint in Game 7, and we always will.
The thing that stood out for me, I'm with Ron Darling of TBS, the thing that stood out for me in that sequence, Ron, with Kershaw, was the guy who caught him, was the guy who they traded A.J. Ellis, his so-called personal catcher, away for, in Carlos Ruiz. And when that trade went down, everybody thought, well, here are the Dodgers messing with Kershaw's mind, and that's the last guy you should do that to and with. And yet here they are embracing each other on the mound after maybe their biggest postseason win since that '88 series year. That was remarkable.
I'm sure the only one who felt really bad about that was A.J. Ellis sitting at home, probably having to watch that. I thought it was interesting. One, that he had to come in and face Murphy, and Murphy missed a pretty good pitch to hit. And then, of course, he got the youngster Defoe. But, Clayton's so good. I mean, he could pitch to a high school catcher and be successful in the major leagues. He's just that good. And I was happy for Chooch because it's been kind of a rocky last couple of years in Philadelphia.
Talking about Carlos Ruiz, obviously I'm on the phone with Ron Darling, and before we get to the ALCS, let's put a button on this. What do you think happens now that the series is tied at 1 moving to Los Angeles?
Well, I think, L.A. is going to have to come up with some, a little better starting pitching. Jansen, even though he went 2 innings last night, you're not going to be able to cart him out there all the time for 2 innings, maybe like they're doing with Miller in the Cleveland-Toronto series. So they're going to have to get some better starting pitching because, the starting pitching for the Cubs is so strong. But it'll be interesting to see the Cub fans have to sweat a little bit. I mean, it seems like the series I'm doing is for the team to have the right to play the Cubs. Dodgers might have something to say about that.
Yeah, I do get that feeling watching you and Ernie and Cal on the call on TBS that it's for the right to take on the Cubs, and certainly with the Cubs having their GM being Theo Epstein, who won the World Series with Tito Francona, the two best curse lifterers that we've seen in baseball in some time. What makes Francona's Indians so good, having seen them so close up as you have, Ron?
Well, there's a couple of things. One is, their offense is underrated. When they lost Michael Brantley, I think a lot of people thought that their offense wouldn't be strong enough. Jose Ramirez, of course, has been great. Mike Napoli had a career year, to be his age and do that. I think Napoli's been a great force in the clubhouse. Of course, getting Andrew Miller was the key, as we've seen in all of these postseason games for Cleveland. But I think really the most important guy is the guy in the dugout. Terry Francona is going to be at some point going into the Hall of Fame as manager. And he's just that good. And, when I get to talk to him before the games, he has such a brilliant mind. But he's not a self-promoter. He's very self-deprecating. He always refers to the players first and this or that. But I don't think there's been anyone any better who's been in the dugout during the postseason.
You know, because I also talked about it on Friday's show after that Game 5 in the divisional series that all sports have coaches, right? Except for baseball, where they're called managers for a reason, because you're not only just managing the game from out to out, inning to inning, but you're managing the egos and personalities over a very, very long season. What makes Francona so good on that front, best you can tell, Ron?
Well, I think, one, he's a good communicator. Two, he's really bluntly honest. And I think players love that, as opposed to the manager who tells you what you kind of want to hear. He tells you what you need to hear. I think that's great. And then the other thing is, and I think it's a hard thing to do, is that you have to know each and every player on your team. You have to know what they can do, what they can't do. And the key in any of these postseason games is that at some point, you know, you have a 25-man roster, but really there's 15 people that you really want to play in the game. You know, those are your maximized great players. And he has the ability to make sure those guys get into those games. And I think that's why they win most of them.
Ron Darling, who's on the call of tonight's Game 3 between the Indians and Blue Jays here on the Rich Eisen Show. How is he handling Andrew Miller, Ron? And by that I mean this. You know, they almost didn't win and sweep in Boston because Allen was struggling closing games, and Miller just seems to be so lights out. Do you think there's a possibility they could swap roles at some point over the remaining games of the postseason?
You know, I think that's a great question. I think that they won't swap roles, but I would not be surprised that at some point in a game, let's say that Kluber goes 8 strong innings, that Miller will get the ball in the 9th. So you'll have Andrew Miller who will probably pitch every inning from the 5th inning on in a postseason, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It's going to be one of the most remarkable things. But I think in a Kluber game, I'd be very surprised if I had to make a decision on that 9th inning and Kluber goes 8. Who would you go with? I mean, Allen's been great, but I would go with Miller.
Me too. I don't think there's. I wouldn't even stutter doing that.
Yeah.
You know, I wouldn't even stutter doing that. And what do you make of the some of the comments coming out of the Blue Jays clubhouse? Batista talking about the strike zone being more favorable for the Indians, and there's been there hasn't been many tipping of the caps. Let's put it that way, towards the opponent coming out of Toronto's clubhouse.
Yeah, I think it's frustration a lot of times. There was one egregious call. The strike call to Melvin Upton Jr. That hit the dirt for Miller was a bad call and deservedly needed to be argued by Melvin. There was a pitch to Bautista that might have been a little off the plate. Hey, listen, I've never heard any umpire in the history of the game ever deciding that they're going to call one way or the other. They do their best. They do 100% out there. If a couple calls have gone against them, maybe they have. But, the calls haven't been perfect for the Cleveland Indians either. And I think they should spend more of their time, or Jose should, not worrying about the umpire and just, if they're not going to hit the ball out of the ballpark, they're not going to win the series.
Love your call, too, Ron. Give our best to Ernie and Cal, will you please?
Thank you, Rich. Appreciate it.
Always love having Ron Darling here on The Rich Eisen Show.
The Rich Eisen Show, weekdays at noon Eastern on Audience.